Good evening, buenas noches, and thank you for tuning in. On behalf of all of us at the locally based, independently owned bookstore, Books and Books in Miami, Florida, and in partnership with Miami Book Fair, it's my pleasure to welcome you to a virtual evening with Malcolm Nance to discuss They Want to Kill Americans, the militias, terrorists, and deranged ideology of the Trump insurgency, published by our friends at St. Martin's Press. Malcolm Nance is a globally renowned, highly engaging expert on terrorism, extremism, and insurgency, and a multiple New York Times best-selling author whose books include The Plot to Hack America. A 34-year Arabic-speaking veteran of the U.S. intelligence community's Combating Terrorism program, he has been called the Neil deGrasse Tyson of counterterrorism and is considered one of the great African Americans in espionage by the International Spy Museum. He is counterterrorism analyst for NBC News and MSNBC. To moderate this evening's conversation, we're joined by Fernand Amandi, principal at Ben Dixon and Amandi International, where he brings over a decade's worth of experience in research and strategic management with an emphasis in corporate, political, and public affairs, consulting for clients including the United Nations, the Inter-American Development Bank, the World Bank, Univision, the White House, the California Endowment, many others, including U.S. Senator John Kerry and U.S. Senator Robert Menendez. Just a quick reminder that throughout this evening's broadcast, you can post questions below in the Ask a Question feature at the bottom of the screen, and we're going to get to those after the conversation. And please order your copy of They Want to Kill Americans from Books and Books and support independent bookstores. And now, without further ado, I'd like to welcome our guests to the virtual stage. Welcome. So happy to see you both.
It's great to see you, Christina, but I have to admit I'm a little happier to see my man Malcolm because I know that he's now safe. Malcolm, we've got a lot to talk about when it comes to your new book, They Want to Kill Americans. But before we talk about they wanting to kill Americans, I also know that they want to kill Ukrainians, which is where you have been for the last several months. So before we dive into the book, Malcolm, just give us a status update on what you've done, which if those of you watching aren't familiar with, Malcolm actually joined the Ukrainian army to help defend the Ukrainian territory from the Russian aggression. So tell us just, Malcolm, a quick update on that, and then we'll dive right into the book.
Well, I know a lot of people haven't seen me on television in the last few months, and the last time that I was officially on TV was the 18th of April, I think it was, when I had done a small segment with NBC News. And in the middle of that segment, I was wearing a yellow smock. A cruise missile attack happened on our neighborhood. And in fact, the cruise missiles were falling right over our head, blowing up behind us. We thought they were hitting the train station. They were actually missing the train station and killing our neighbors, killed 6 of our neighbors when they hit a car wash. Then that night, the real reason that I was on NBC News came out, and that was because I was announcing that I had left MSNBC, I had left news media, and that I had joined the International Legion, the foreign combat force that is part of the Ukrainian army. And I had been serving in the International Legion since the middle of March. But it was important to the Ukrainian armed forces that I not just be found out near the front battlefield with, weapons and equipment on by my peers in news media. So they did a dramatic rollout that helped us also do recruiting for the International Legion and get the kind of people that we needed into that force. And we have a great force, men and women from 56 different nations. The operating language is English, but we do have groups from Colombia, Korea, Japan, and other places that speak their own language within their sub-platoons. So we have a very large piece of the Ukrainian army battlefront. The people that we face are Russians. There's no doubt here. There's no rear area for us. There's no hiding. I am a combatant. I carry a rifle. As a matter of fact, from time to time, my rifles change. And I carry out the intelligence activities for the battalion. I have several hundred people that require my intimate daily care and feeding to keep them alive. And I'm constantly on the forward edge of the battle area assessing my Russian enemies. So that's pretty much what I do. I'm on leave right now. To be on leave, you have to be out of the Legion. And then next Friday, when I go back to Ukraine, I will go back to my duties.
Well, Malcolm, come back safe and sound as we hope and pray and expect you will. But let's dive into the book here, because Malcolm, we've known each other for a long time. Right. And you know that I was one of the people that felt not only are your books indispensable, they become in essence almost survival guides that help not only understand the present, but predict the future, which is why I gave you the name Malcolm Nance-stradamus.
Nance-stradamus.
Because unfortunately, Malcolm, your predictions, and I say this just sincerely, unfortunately, they have all come true, because many times it has been what a lot of folks have felt was either the hyperbolic scenario or the worst case scenario, when in fact, it was the intelligence database scenario. And your book, your new book, They Want to Kill Americans, while a compelling must-read. And folks, if you haven't gotten it, that right there on the green link below, you can pick it up right now, your copy. I urge you to do so. This is truly a book that is an indispensable tome. But Malcolm, in this book, you paint a very concise, dark, and foreboding picture for what we're going to be experiencing in the United States over the next potentially years to come. Talk to us a little bit about why you have come to the conclusion that this insurgency is real and not going away.
Well, if you recall, I predicted this insurgency on 6 November 2020, 2 days after the election was supposed to be called. And I was on real time with Bill Maher. And, you know, Bill was, to his credit, doing kumbaya, saying now it's time to, it's time to help our fellow Americans understand Joe Biden's the winner, listen to what they have to say. Unfortunately, I understood, because I was already doing research for this book. The book proposal went to publishers at the end of November. And in fact, the contract for this book was signed on the 16th of December, 2020. And the premise was precisely what you're reading now, that there was a coming storm that was about to happen, an insurgency in the United States, and that win, lose, or draw, these people were not going to accept the results of the election. If they had won, by the way, they would have saw themselves as the armed enforcers of Donald Trump's will. They would have saw themselves as the people who had dominated and would dominate the other 65% of the country, only this time with their little Trump convoys with guns. Now that they had lost, it was very clear to me that they were going to go into insurgency. And that what happened on January 6th was insurrection. An insurgency is a series of insurrections and political campaigns which destabilize the seating government so that they can make conditions to overthrow the government. And we already saw that happen 62 days after I made that prediction on Real Time with Bill Maher.
And Malcolm, your book doesn't just predict the events that happened, but it certainly makes the point that the January 6th insurrection was not the end of the process, but only the beginning. So with that said, are you satisfied, Malcolm, that the leaders of the American government right now, all the way up from the White House on down, and including the Justice Department and the FBI and our intelligence agencies, do they have the type of appreciation and understanding for the coming insurgency that you outline in your book, They Want to Kill Americans?
Not at all. And, you know, this tends to be the case on everything that I write about. You might recall they did not have the urgency of now when the Russians were hacking the DNC. And, you know, I was on air saying this is an intelligence operation to attack the United States and to put Donald Trump into power. Everyone wants to be decent. Everyone wants to give everyone else benefit of the doubt. But these warnings, and I wrote this as a real warning, this is one of the few books where I do not end on a happy note. I usually end on a note, you know, stressing the Constitution, the Founding Fathers. Not this time. This time, I just leave you with their own very words, and they're terrifying. They're chilling. The book starts with the words that Officer Mike Fernand heard while he was being beaten and tased, and that was, "Kill him with his own gun." So, this book was really, it's not so much about January 6th at all. As you said, 90% of it is to tell you about what's coming in the next few years, or quite possibly this coming generation, which is just mind-boggling. That Trump supporters, all of these groups, Proud Boys, Boogaloo Boys, and the rest, have transformed themselves in what I call Titus, Titus, the Trump insurgency in the United States. And that includes, the guy who's your plumber, the guy that repairs your car, the real estate broker, the rich entrepreneur who goes around in a Porsche. These guys have all seen Donald Trump as their avatar and their tribal chief. And as tribal chief, they get to, they see him as the embodiment of the end of political correctness, where they could say and do anything that they saw fit because they felt that they were the inheritors of the American spirit. And so in inheriting that, they don't have to be nice to people. They don't have to be decent. They don't have to look out for the common good. They can think that America belongs to them. And that's why they are now behaving the way they are, because Donald Trump gave them permission to be as mean, crude, and intimidating with firearms as they want. And they now believe they work for him and that America belongs to them and no one else.
Now, Malcolm, you talk about this a little bit in the book, but for the benefits of those listening to us tonight, take us through a couple of the historical parallels that you think most resemble the moment that the United States finds itself in now with this coming insurgency that you write about, and they want to kill Americans. And the follow-up to that, Malcolm, is what do the authorities need to be doing now that they are not doing to try and quell this coming insurrection before it potentially gets out of control and the violence becomes widespread and lingering?
Well, the historical precedents are wide, but what we're seeing here with regards to the Titus is we're seeing several different strains that we had seen before. The anti-Semitic movement of the early 1900s to the 1920s in the United States, which persisted all the way up till the movie Caddyshack, when Rodney Dangerfield made that very interesting joke about the racism and exclusivity of golf courses. And you recall in the 70s and it was the 1980s and 90s would be when golf courses finally would allow those horrible women, blacks, and Jews to play on their links. But anti-Semitism in the United States has now reared its ugly head, and it's the entire basis of the QAnon conspiracy. The blood libel of the medieval era saying that, people led by Jews were drinking the blood of children in order to prolong themselves. Well, in the Protocols of the Elder of Zion, that Hode's document that was written in Russia in the early 1900s, the exact same thing was being said about Jews, that they were the ones who run the entire financial system in the world. Another QAnon trope that's been bought into, that they drink blood of Christian children. The blood libel there again. Now it's been transformed into Hillary Clinton drinks the blood of kidnapped children in order to look younger, and that there are secret underground military bases they call DUMBs, right? DUMBS, deep underground military bases, and that there's a secret high-speed train system that goes from city to city underground. All of these fantastical, insane things sound fantastical, insane, till you realize that QAnon is as many as 20 million Americans believe in this stuff. And they are 100% on board with Donald Trump. So all those armed groups that we saw in 2017, 2018, and 2019, by 2020, they had transformed themselves from individual groups like the Boogaloo Boys, the Three Percenters, and came together under the umbrella of Titus. They were all lovers of Donald Trump. And for every one of them, there were 9 people not associated with a militia group who were coming out with their guns in their camouflage uniforms in the George Floyd summer of 2020. They thought this was the time for them to come out and parade and execute power on the streets. So what can the government do now that we have this conspiracy theory world where all of these people live in an alternate reality, where America is aflame and trillions of dollars of damage was done by the George Floyd protest, and no one will save them except, Donald Trump and his cheating at golf, which, by the way, according to them, anything is acceptable for Donald Trump to do because it's being done in their name. So lying 30,000 times, nothing. He doesn't lie to them as far as they're concerned, right? Cheating on his wife, well, that's just an excess that we can allow of him. In fact, there were people who made the biblical reference to a King Crocus, who was a rapist, a child molester, all these horrible things in the Bible. But when he turned to Christianity, all was forgiven. And this is how some in their world see him. Then again, Donald Trump is seen amongst the Titus and the most extreme part, the QAnon parts, as not as president of the United States. They would routinely refer to him as GEOTUS, God Emperor of the United States. And they weren't joking. To them, he is, both a form of a living God on earth, and that he is fulfilling all of their wishes, which really involve getting rid of uppity women, uppity minorities, suppressing the Jews, and seizing America strictly for 30% of the other Americans. And the 65% left over would be ruled over. They wouldn't be governed. They would be ruled over by force. And this was the fantasy they had on January 6th. They all thought that this was the storm, the QAnon fantasy where the entire military would be turned out to arrest all liberals, liberal politicians, Jews, blacks, and then the good ones would be sent back to work, and the others would be taken to some summary trials and executed. That's what they were really hoping was happening on January 6th.
Now, Malcolm, those that might say, well, wait a minute, Malcolm, yes, we saw the flurry of activities around January 6th, but the United States is still a civilized society that has law enforcement, be it in local police, the National and State Guard, and obviously, if needed, the federal armed forces. What do you say to those that feel that the situation might not necessarily be as ominous because, for all intents and purposes, we continue to live in a society of law and order under the rule of law?
Well, we just barely continue to live in a society of law and order as of January 6th. It was a very close thing. Several thousand people got into that building. And to tell you the truth, the one person who really did their duty for American democracy that day was the police lieutenant who shot Ashley Babbitt. Because beyond him was all of the House of Representatives, the ballots for the Electoral College. And, he called it. He said, this is the last bastion. If these people get between there, they were punching the glass with their fist and shattering it. And the cops who were out in the hallway didn't appear as if they were going to do anything, right? They were closing upon the end of American democracy. And he decided he was going to stand firm, and whoever the first person through that window, through the last barricade, was going to meet lethal force. That was truly one of the shots heard around the world in American history. And after that broke the intensity of the attack, because they didn't know what to do now. Now they have blood on the streets spilled. But the real heroism of that day comes from the fact that law enforcement restrained themselves from having a massacre on the Capitol. And I know many people think, well, you should have done it, violating laws, crimes, and all that. We could have gone to civil war that day if the cops had really started opening fire on the 10,000 protesters that were attacking them on Capitol Hill. But that being said, American democracy was saved. But, and this is what I write in the book, read their plans. They have no intention of letting that be round one. And the Republican Party has shifted its entire belief system towards insurgency, not allowing anything. I mean, God, they voted just the other day, 168 of them as a solid block, against having Amber Alerts for mass shooters. So now they're on the side of mass shooters. Just utterly amazing, because giving any one vote to the Democrats is less important, is an anathema to them. It's a disgusting trait, and they want to make sure Democrats get nothing. They don't care how badly it damages America.
Malcolm, your knowledge of data, your reading of intelligence reports, your own human intel sources in the field, what does it tell you in your inimitable Malcolm Nance way? What can we anticipate between now and the election, and then in the period post the 2022 election, where you start to try and see this insurgency potentially assert itself in actual incidents around the country?
Well, between now and the election, I don't think you're going to see much other than Donald Trump make his announcement that he's running for president so he can stay out of jail, right? It's the after this election. What if, here's a scenario that's interesting. What if everyone really turns out? Democrats, pro-American Republicans, independents that love America, and they understand finally that this could be the last American election ever. And they turn out and they whip the Republicans. The Republicans don't take the House. The Republicans don't take the Senate. We expand the House. We expand the Senate by 1 or 2 votes. Then you are going to see danger. Now, this is not to say we should give them what they want. You never negotiate with a terrorist. Never. Because concession is what they're doing this for. They want concessions. So what we need to do is be prepared as average Americans to understand when you might see that armed protest. After this election might be the time to call the police instead of saying, oh, it's just guys exercising their Second Amendment rights. Get on the phone and blow up the phone. Make sure law enforcement and the governorships and the state do their duty to be prepared to protect America. Because some of these states agree with these protesters. Idaho, Wyoming, some of these states, in fact, like, South Dakota, may, in fact, bring out the National Guard in support of those protesters, may ignore the federalization of their forces by the President of the United States. I have no idea. But I do know this. If they win this November, they will become that armed, unofficial armed enforcement branch of the Trump insurgency of Titus.
Malcolm, what are the tools within the presidential toolkit or the Justice Department toolkit to at least try and contain or minimize the threat that Titus represents in the country between now and over really the next 2 years?
Well, you would have thought that in the last 18 months, the Justice Department would have understood just how dire the situation is. I don't have a lot of faith until something turns up that this Justice Department is doing anything more than being procedural. And when I say they're being procedural, it means that they are adhering strictly to the letter of the law, the spirit of the law, giving the defendants every break, carrying out slow, meticulous investigations so as not to upset people. And when I say upset people, the people who are the targets of their probes or who could be the targets of their probes. I've been in a room full of lawyers, Republican or Democrat. They all behave the same, right? They all start asking each other where they went to law school, who they clerked for, and it's quite chummy. But I know it was the former Navy lawyer, Pam Keith, who pulls her hair out all the time about saying, why are we not indicting these people? Why are we not making clear through announcements of investigations that we will go after the top leadership? You have to give the people something to believe in, because the Republicans have something they believe in. They believe you're going to do nothing. They believe that we, the Justice Department, are going to behave as it always does, which is friend to all, right? Now, they go after protesters who are innocent protesters for animal rights on Capitol Hill with a lot more vigor than they've gone after Donald Trump. Donald Trump launched a seditious conspiracy against the United States that should have already been at the point where he couldn't have been able to run for president. But everyone's cutting brakes and giving benefit of the doubt. And that's where the president of the United States, who of course should not put his thumb on the scales of justice, but he should make it damn clear that justice must be done. Merrick Garland, let's be honest, was a mistake. He's a mistake. The president should put in a new attorney general way before this election and say, hey, the people need to have confidence that the Justice Department is doing what it's doing, as opposed to being procedural about it.
Folks, you have the opportunity. We're going to get to Q&A in just a second. If you see a little box with a question mark in it, you can type in your question. We'll get to it in just a second. And remember, if you haven't yet done so, you see on the green link before, thank you to Books and Books for providing it. You can pick up your copy of They Want to Kill Americans, where Malcolm not only lays out the who, the what, the when, and the where, but also the why. And the why is an important insight to set up my next question to Malcolm, which is, for those that are now watching us here, Malcolm, and those that will eventually come to read your book, what makes books like yours so disturbing is that they force you to pay attention. They force you to understand and reflect on what you're writing. And in essence, they also force you to take action. But for many Americans, the question about what action to take now to hopefully prevent them from wanting to kill more Americans in future is what to do. So Malcolm, what do you encourage readers of your book and those that will eventually read your book? What are the steps that they can themselves do in the here and now, in the present, to hopefully try and offset this threat, if at all possible?
I know this is going to sound mundane and routine, but there's only one weapon that our founders gave us in order to affect change, and that's the vote. Now, there are some clever ways you could turn out the vote. There are some ways that you can mobilize your entire community to reject all of these things that we're seeing. And one of those ways is, I lived in New York 19. The congressman who we had used to be named John Faso, and he had an office in Kinderhook, which was near where I live. And he just never came to work. So an activist group out of Indivisible 19 would meet up at his office every Friday, first 5 or 6 people, and they would have a little mini protest. And then they would just stand there and occupy the space for a period of time. Over a while, this got to be actually very popular. And they would do voter registrations there. They would do voter knowledge by handing out flyers, talk to people, explain what Faso was not doing, how he was not representing them, to the point where Faso Friday would have hundreds of people every Faso. It turned into a donut and pizza party. And these people used and harnessed that strength of activism in the next election to elect an African American in a district that was overwhelmingly Republican. It is about the energy of you, the voter, the energy of you, the individual. If you're bringing out one extra person, that's great. Then bring out 5 and make it your job to evangelize on the defense of American democracy, to evangelize on your love of America. And that you need to say, we need to stand up to these people with the guns. When you see protesters with guns, hey, get in their face. Don't hit them, don't strike them, don't break any laws, but a massive crowd of you with signs, right? Saying whatever it is that you want to say, and just show them that the power of their weapon is the inherent threat against you. Law enforcement will be watching, but so long as they have a right to walk around like idiots with those guns, you have a right to put a poster up so that they can't be seen, the way that they used to do, against that crazy church that would come and protest at veterans' funerals, right? The name will come to me in a minute. So don't go out and confront for the sake of confronting. Confront for the sake of educating. Confront for the video showing that your people power outnumbers their guns. And when they come back with more people with guns, make sure you have more people with guns. One of the most effective protest movements in the world was in Argentina, when these little band of old ladies, whose sons were all murdered by the regime down there, just showed up and kept showing up and kept showing up and kept showing up consistently, to where people started noticing, hey, these little old ladies of the disappeared are always here. You have to show up now. When you show up, people will get involved with you. Invite more people to get involved. Turn your meetings and your protests I recommend you go to every congressional office, Democrat or Republican, and show that we now have the power, people power. If you can start getting up to 100, 200 people there every Friday and doing an ABBA disco dance party, believe me, people are going to pay attention, and they're going to want your energy. They don't want the energy of idiots running around in camouflage carrying AR-15s. They want the energy of Dancing Queen. But that will only be successful if you understand all of your effort is what's going to save democracy without gunplay.
Malcolm, the other effort that you talk about in the book is vigilance, and how a lot of times it's the everyday citizens who can tip off people in positions of responsibility about suspected insurgent activity. Malcolm, many of us either have neighbors or friends or members of our extended family or just people we know in the community that we suspect might be involved in these paramilitary insurgencies. If we do, and we have a feeling, you talk about it in the book, but tell folks what they should do. Who should they reach out to? What agencies, what entities to report this type of activity?
Well, first off, and I've said this in my own district in New York, where we have a group who tracks symbols of hate in our district. They have a website. And at first they were tracking, Trump flags and the "Don't Tread on Me" Patriot flags. And I told them specifically, you cannot do that. Those are indicators of your neighbor's intent, but it's also their right and it's peaceful. But if they're out there flying swastikas, or, the "F you Joe Biden" sign is also protected speech. But if they're flying the Sonnenrad, which is the circular symbol, which is associated with, Nazi runism, and other really identifiable flags like Patriot Front. The Patriot Front is that group that's been coming in the khakis and mask shirts and carrying out these Nazi-style marches with American flags. Until just recently, they were just bumper stickers. Now they are bringing arms and taking action. And you need to turn your community out when these stickers are slapped around your neighborhood. Take photographs of them, share them, create a Facebook page. But you can't allow that, or the Proud Boys, or some of these other groups. The Proud Boys has been designated a terrorist group in Canada. You have to then bring people out and protest that. We had an incident in a village near us named Chatham, where these Patriot Front stickers started showing up. And finally, two guys got the nerve to start standing on the street corner in downtown Chatham, New York, a genteel upper middle class, Columbia County space, with their hatred flags. And the next weekend, 200 people from the community came out to take that corner back and said hate has no home in Chatham. You have to come out in spades. You have to come out in numbers far greater than they do to show that you have power. People power is what they're very afraid of. They are afraid of mass protests. And we are at the point where it's time for you to show yourselves. Don't just talk about what you see on Twitter and Facebook. Get up and do something about it. Then take a photograph of it, put it on Twitter and Facebook. And you will show your peers that you are truly defending American democracy.
Folks, again, if you haven't done so, there's the green link right below Malcolm's heroic mug. Buy They Want to Kill Americans, that Books and Books is kind to provide. They can get it to you in a short amount of time. And if you're in, of course, the South Florida area, you can go pick up your copy in store as soon as this is over. We have some questions. We're going to turn it over to Christina so that in our remaining time, we can get to as many questions as possible. But if you haven't had a question yet, you can just fill it out there in the Ask a Question box, and Christina will take us through that section now. Welcome back.
Okay. So, wow. So we have a lot of questions. Here's one from Michelle. Is the Justice Department dragging its feet because they realize convicting Trump will kick off the Civil War?
Well, I certainly hope not, because then what you're doing is you're changing justice to meet a demand of essentially hostage takers, right? That means that you're more worried about the events that may be precipitated by a just and lawful act. And if that's the case, then you're not upholding justice. What you're doing is you're making an arbitrary decision about when you think justice applies. Now, what happens if you miss your window and they take power and they start dismantling the Justice Department? Or they start using the Justice Department lawyers inside, like we saw in the last administration, to start investigating you, the lawyer that was trying to maintain justice. Look, I want to point something out. If you've ever seen the movie Judgment at Nuremberg, movie with Spencer Tracy as one of the justices who was putting men on trial after Nazi Germany collapsed, I would like to point out to you who was on trial in that movie. It was the Supreme Court of Nazi Germany that was on trial. And the cases and decisions that they allowed the sterilization of women, laws that allowed them to euthanize, and they killed every mentally deficient person in Nazi Germany. Everyone who was handicapped naturally from birth was killed. I mean, the Nazis allowed all their possessions to be taken. The Nazis allowed the Jews to be turned into non-citizens. The Supreme Court of that land did that. Don't think that we don't have a Justice Department that might not do that. The last Justice Department, a junior ecology lawyer wanted to have himself appointed Attorney General because he was willing to declare martial law to take over the United States. And Trump was going to do it. Just insane. The Justice Department better not be dragging its feet.
Thank you. A question from Claudia. Can you address where you see the future fate impact of the media?
Well, this is funny about the media, because the media is an interesting animal. For organizations that are really built on bread and circuses, it appears that from time to time they want to see only some bread and some circuses, right? They want to see the bread handed out at a certain time. They want to see a certain type of circus. And apparently, they are not interested in Cirque du Soleil, right? They are not interested in sophisticated acts of great talent. They are interested in the lions eating the Christians type of circus, right? They loved the Trump administration. We've seen journalists admit this, that the behaviors of them gave them something to write about every day, and that Joe Biden was this ho-hum workaday guy who saved the economy, brought back every job that was lost. It pretty much managed COVID to the point where it was almost gone, all right, except the American public doesn't want to help. And it's got the United States on the right track. But, you know, his 33% approval rating is because 35% of liberal progressives didn't get their little ice cream that night, and whatever it was, criminal justice reform or the Voting Rights Act or whatever, and they suddenly decide that maybe it's better that the Republicans run things. Now, before you say, whoa, Malcolm, we didn't say that. No, you didn't. But because you don't support Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, and you go to a pollster and you say, I don't like Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, he comes up at 33% and increases the likelihood that the House takes control of power, and then American democracy ends. That's because many progressives are self-serving. And I'm saying that as an intelligence analysis. If I was a member of British MI6 and I had to write up an analysis of the American chaotic political scene, the self-serving nature of many people in the progressive coalition will end us, especially on the extreme left, who would rather, burn America down like they did, when they were backing the Green Party in 2016, because they think it might be more interesting to have a Donald Trump back in office. Look, people, I didn't write this book for fun. I definitely didn't write it for profit. I gave all the profits of this book to the International Legion Foundation in defense of Ukraine. I will tell you right now, this is a warning. And I want it on the #1 on New York Times bestsellers list, not because it would be great. I can say I've been on the New York Times bestsellers list. I've been on 4 times before. It's because I want the American public to see that cover in their bookstores and go, wait a minute, maybe I'm thinking about this all wrong. Maybe I really should think that we might be in a period of danger. That is what this is about. You all need to heed the warnings. There's no money in this for anybody if the country burns to the ground, right? Peace, what is it? Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, right? The acquisition of prosperity will only go to 30% of this nation. And we're months from it. Just surprising that we got this book out in time.
Thank you. Related from Diane, I suspect a militia camp is forming up the hill. Sheriff and other county government don't care. What's the best way to get media attention?
Go down there and protest peacefully and lawfully and with whatever parameters that the sheriff puts on you. If they say across the street, cross the street. Have your signs, no militias, no armed gunmen, no insurrectionists, okay? Here's what they don't want. They don't want any attention. They want to say, oh, we're just a bunch of good old guys out here shooting out in the farms, in the hinterlands, having it, doing things lawfully. That's true. It's not about the lawfulness of them owning firearms. That's been decided. It's about the potential of them training together with the intent to overthrow the United States government. Make them come out to the local news media and explain what they're doing. Make them open up their training camps to people. We're seeing a particular class of people who are the basis of the Titus are not militiamen. They're people that side with the militiamen and are buying up all the AR-15s and AR-15 ammunition. But be peaceful.
Thank you. From Andrea, how do accelerations, thank you, such as Peter Thiel play into the domestic terrorists trying to overthrow democracy?
I'm rubbing my head because you're talking about accelerationism, which is the intent to accelerate the collapse of the good order of the United States. And you have billionaires. Let me tell you something about the difference between liberal and conservative billionaires. Liberal billionaires, of which I don't know any, okay? I've been told that they exist, but they're pretty much billionaires. They're people who are out to make money. And their causes are liberal because, and they support the arts. They're patrons of, the finer things. There's a big difference between liberal billionaires, or whatever you want to call it, average billionaires, and conservative billionaires. Conservative billionaires literally will put up, like the late Sheldon Adelson, will put up $100 million to buy a complete change in American foreign policy, or to buy the way America is viewed, or to buy courts outright by putting people in there. The last 3 Supreme Court justices were purchased by billionaires, right? Who's funded Donald Trump. And they were shameless about their belief that, yes, that's why we did this, right? So that being said, those people like Peter Thiel, okay, have no problem funding secretly and openly some of the worst groups in America because they understand these squeaky wheels, they're not going to get the oil. Those squeaky wheels are going to create more squeaky wheels, and they're going to create more squeaky wheels. And then they're all going to squeak together to overthrow the government, and then they're going to take over the oil can factory when you open your mouth. You are the one that will lose your right to democracy. This is a minority, a partidist group of white nationalists who love Donald Trump, who are all preparing to do away with America as it's existed for 245 years. Let's call it 240 years, because for 4 years, that was being challenged. 5 years, that was being challenged in the American Civil War, right? So, but as of now, they would rather fight. And I know a lot of them are, I call them the lazy insurgents, right? These guys do not want to be inconvenienced. They don't want their, weekend parties done, broken up, their tailgaters broken up for them to go and be part of a civil war, right? But there is an entire minority nucleus that will mobilize those people into thinking this will be an armed revolution block party, and you will be the 1776 hero they were shouting when they took over the Capitol. The Capitol insurrection is a sign. Only 20% of those people, 1 in 5, were members of the armed forces or veterans of the armed forces or law enforcement. The other 4 were what we call MWRs, men with rifles. And those 20% help mobilize the rest of them to dress like their Delta Force, to get their body armor right, to wear their helmets right, and come out there with sticks, flags, clubs, axes, knives, and firearms. And I personally identified at least 3 firearms just randomly looking at photographs. That is why we need to stand up and defend this nation, because they're ready to pop up and do it themselves just when you're not looking.
Thank you. From Peggy, is there any way the GOP can be deprogrammed from these white supremacists, Q anti-government militias? It looks like there's no hope for that to happen. People need to read this book to understand how deep this hate runs.
No. That is just the straight answer. The other day, I was giving this book talk at Politics and Prose in D.C., and I literally ran into Joe Walsh, the former conservative, who is now an independent. And let me quote him. The Republican Party is so deeply corrupt, so immersed in violent extremism, white supremacy, that there is no hope for it by name, and that it must be completely and ruthlessly dismantled. Here's the only way it's going to happen. There will be a precipitating event in which conspiracy will be found, and their forces will do extreme violence in this country. And it will be put down, and it will be put down ruthlessly. And only then are people going to be held account. And I'm afraid for that. I'm afraid for that scenario. I don't want that scenario. I don't want people to be held to account because they all suddenly decided they were going to take over the State House of Idaho and hang all the Democratic lawmakers out the windows, which, by the way, was a plan that the militias in Michigan were going to carry out when they decided to go kidnap the governor. They were going to hang all the Democrats. They were going to release all the Republicans, release all the state troopers, and then hang people out the windows of their state houses and declare an independent, state of Idaho. That will bring the United States Army into that state. That will take over. The United States will have to nationalize the National Guard and arrest anybody that doesn't want to do their duty. And we will have the first makings of civil war. But when that happens, there's no, this guy put the rope around their neck. We are going to have to do what happened with the first rise of the first Ku Klux Klan, which is Ulysses S. Grant went down there with the Union Army and did a Iraq-style ruthless purge of all the politicians, arrested them, arrested the judges, and cleansed the entire system from top to bottom to where the United States government had to appoint the judges down there to make sure that they had gotten rid of the Ku Klux Klan. But don't worry, Ku Klux Klan came back 2 more times.
Okay, thank you. From Joanna, how do we reclaim patriotism? Our flag has been co-opted by anti-American Titus movements. I think a true patriotism is powerful if we can wrest it back and use it against them.
Oh, yeah. I've been a big advocate of this movement, wresting patriotism back. And it's very simple because we come to these protests and we bring, our handmade signs and all of that. And what they do is they co-opt patriotism by bringing the American flag, right? Like the Patriot Front, those group of Nazis all marching in khaki shirts and blue shirts and baseball caps, their masks covered. But what are they carrying? The American flag. That flag is not really a flag to them. It is a solid piece of steel that they want to beat people with. And we saw that at the January 6th insurrection.
Mm-hmm.
You want to take back patriotism? Next time you have a protest of any size, and I recommend that it be big. Don't come out unless you're going to come out in numbers to where people see you. Everyone carry an American flag, every one of you. And start using the motto, we are the real people. We are the people. 65% of this country did not vote for Donald Trump, right? We turned out 81 million to 76 million. The only problem is they gained 5 million more crazy people, right, that voted for him. And then 60% of the American public didn't even bother to vote. So you have to turn out 20% more of those people that didn't vote. You have to show them you are the true patriots. You don't have to wear crazy clothes and all that stuff, but we need to bring the flag out. We need to take that flag back and show that it is not a weapon for us, not the flag turned upside down, the flag flown proudly, right? American veterans, you veterans who go out there, don't go out there and like, I'm a veteran flag, poster. Carry the flag of your service, the large one with the frills on the end, right? Show them that you are a block, that you are there, that you outnumber conservatives in many instances 3-1. But we don't do that. We're not, I don't know why. We're not the French. We're not the Greeks. We're not the South Koreans. We don't know how to protest well. I would have thought that after Roe versus Wade, there would be marches bigger than the Pink Hat March that took place in 2017. That was the last successful march progressives and liberals turned out. And you know why? I'm going to tell you the truth about that. Because so many of those groups wanted at the end of that march to be in charge of the movement. They all fractionalized and split up. Everyone wants to be in charge of their own parade. Fernand and I tried to mobilize a march. It didn't go well. People don't understand. It's like that scene in The Handmaid's Tale when they finally get ordered to get out of their jobs and women had to stay home and they come out to finally protest. And when they finally march in the streets against the government mandates, they're gunned down with impunity. They don't care you're out protesting anymore. You no longer control the government. They can kill you as you see fit. So long as we have the ability to get out there, somebody, for God's sakes, and I actually was told this by a member of Indivisible in 2020, we're not going to do anything related to protest. We're not going to do anything related to raising voices. We're only doing voter registration. Well, that's nice. I recommend that one of those liberal billionaires out there in Southern Florida, somebody fly to Paris, or on your next trip to Paris, when you're walking down the Rue de Rivoli or hanging out at the Ritz and the Place Vendôme, all right, or bumping into me at the Westin, or at the Hotel Korean Bar, that you come and you say, Malcolm, where are those French professional protesters that can turn out 100,000 people on an average union protest? I recommend you go find some of them and ask them how they organize and how they manage to turn out millions over union rights or millions to counter protest the yellow vest protest. I mean, Europe has got it down to a science. In America, anything that inconveniences us for 5 minutes and takes us away from Candy Crush, and no offense to Candy Crush, we won't do. We have become a nation that will have to be gunned down in the streets before we suddenly realize the handmaiden's tale is upon us.
Do you think it's because people are just tired, exhausted from the pandemic? Just like, I'm personally so worried about Latinos, in Miami, specifically Cuban Americans, of which I'm one, but a Democrat. But this whole Latinos leaving the Democratic Party.
Yeah, in favor of macho, right?
The God Emperor, it's worrisome. It's really worrisome.
Well, it is in fact worrisome, right? But how do you say it in Spanish? Is it que sucedido contigo?
¿Qué sucede contigo? Right.
¿Qué sucede contigo? That would be my message. What's wrong with you?
What the? Yeah, there are other ways to say it.
Figure out the way so you say it in Cubano.
¿Qué te pasa? ¿Qué te pasa contigo?
Or ¿qué coño pasa contigo? That would be another way.
¿Qué carajo pasa contigo?
Carajo, ¿qué pasa contigo? Yo, no, mi amiga, ¿qué pasa contigo?
Yes.
Right? You support. I saw a Haitian community supporting Trump. Trump would get rid of every Haitian in the country if he could. But there's this body of people who come from the middle class and upper middle class of many of these nations and who are immigrants, who are believers in the money, the vision of him as the apparatus that will make them more successful if they go against the rest of their community. And I'll be quite honest with you, I know Fernand pulls his hair out about this. You know, there is no messaging to the Latino community. I don't see it. I don't know who's in charge of it. Whoever it is should be fired, right? Go get, go get Fernand, all right? Put him in the White House and get out there with this message that they hate you. They hate you. You think they like you. You voted for them. They talk behind your back. They will come out. And for those of you who say, oh, they're going to stop Mexicans at the border. I'm not Mexican. I'm a Colombiano. I'm a Cubano. I lived in Spain for 8 years. You never know, right? These people who think that you're going to be treated equally. You're not going to be. You are a stepping stone, and stepping stones are stepped on. Mm-hmm. So we have to do a national mobilization, right? Mm-hmm. Take back our community's beliefs. It's not about going to church. I'm Catholic. I go to church. I was raised Catholic. I'm not Latino. But you know what? I will tell you who's against. Donald Trump is the biggest religious hypocrite in the world. The Pope the Pope had things to say about how things were being run in the United States. How can you be for Jesus Christ, right? Mm-hmm. And go to church and take communion if you believe in this man's world? Is it cartel worship? I mean, many people supported Pablo Escobar when he was blowing up airliners over Colombia, right? You have to break that cycle of belief that this is un hombre más que más macho. He's not. He is the devil in your community, and he uses you. That would be another good motto. But you have to be in your face, as I am right now. This man uses you. He hates your children. He hates you. He hates your children. But when the last time we were at Books and Books, Fernand, remember there was a big Cuban contingent that came out there, and we're going Trump, 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 and I let him. I said, go ahead, you guys protest, have a good time, but that's a mistake, because if he could break all ties with Cuba, all he wants is your money. There won't be any, Nuevo Bay of Pigs. I
even knew where Cuba was on the map,
No. If he had his way, he'd sell it back to Japan, right?
Oh, my God.
That's just the way he sees the world.
It is. Okay, so we'll do one more question. Here's one that says, there is a growing, for lack of a better term, Black MAGA movement made up of different organizations, ADOs, FBA, Freedmen's. I suspect that these groups have huge GOP ties. What is your take on these Black MAGA groups?
They do, and they first manifested themselves to me in 2017, September 2017, when this group called ADOS, ADOS, American Descendants of Slaves, went hard at Kamala Harris when she was talking about running for president. And their whole shtick, which is horrible and racist. And these guys have energy. They're individuals, and they get a lot of money from Trump. Professor Cornel West called it the only Tom syndrome. These are the people that want to be the only black in the room at Republican conventions, so that they can be worshipped and and idolized as a good black person, as opposed to the 42 million bad black people, right, who don't vote for us. They are cultural and community sellouts. I'll be the one to say it. But that ADOS group, for example, which comes after me regularly, I just make fun of them. Their whole shtick was, if your family wasn't sold in slavery on the continental United States, then you're not as good a person or an American as a family that was sold in Charleston. So if your family was sold in the Bahamas off the same slave ship, or you got off in Dominica with the cargo that was offloaded there, or Cuba that was offloaded there, and then the best slaves all went to Charleston, South Carolina, then you deserve none of the benefits of the United States. It is, I called it point of retail racism, historical point of retail racism. It is the most mind-bogglingly stupid thing I have ever heard in my life. And they got no play amongst blacks. And they call for extremist things that no white in the Republican Party certainly wouldn't entertain, including reparations. But someone is funding these people. And this is what Trump is saying about, ooh, I got the black men. He understands that there's a class of black man that responds well to bow ties and, Ferraris and things like that, who will want to be the person who is honored within that group by selling out the interest of other groups. Like the guy who's Blacks for Trump. You notice I just said the guy who is Blacks for Trump. It's one guy. And he's at every rally, and he has a criminal past. And he's at every rally. He is a for-hire person. This is his income. But he has a history of mental illness, and the Trump rallies prove that. But Trump points to him, where's my black guy at? Right? He is there as a token of inclusiveness. Whereas the 42 million African Americans are 100% discounted until it's time to vote. Right? And then you see our true power. The African American, the Latino, the South Asian, the East Asian vote, the Native American vote. When you come together, you have power, and you need to make those demands. And this, to a certain extent, is a little bit of what Biden's trouble is. He makes the demands, but he doesn't follow through, right? If you're going to go get voting rights sustained, and there's 2 Democratic senators in the way, it's time to pull a Lincoln, right? It's time to start twisting arms and making promises, to get that legislation passed, considering that it would benefit West Virginia dramatically. Joe Manchin is just waiting for his moment to become a Republican, and that will happen the second there's a Republican House. Same thing. Kirsten Sinema is a traitor, just a straight up. I'm wondering whether she was actually a Green, which is what she started as, and that someone got to her and said, listen, we're going to run you as a Democrat, but we know you're actually a libertarian Republican, and we will reward you for it. She has never done anything for the real American people, other than wear a red dress on the vote where she was going to betray the voting rights and other acts to the Republicans. We have got to also groom our people better. We have to groom our people better. Sinema's going to be out in the next one, but what does it matter if we lost the House this November? The end of the American Republic is coming. That's the warning of my book. Is it going to come with your lack of attention to voting? You're complaining about you not getting something, thinking, oh, I hear this all the time, but you always say this. We always have to turn out. Yes, you always have to turn out. And your children and their friends, especially the young. Get them out. Drag them out. Have a giant ABBA disco dance party, pizza party at the end of the election. But get them out this November, because I'm tired of having to defend America on both flanks, on the eastern flank in Ukraine, where if it collapses over there, Donald Trump's second coming will happen, and democracy in Europe could be snuffed out. And then the western flank over here, where we have people who are willing to kill to break American democracy. So it's up to you to help that. I can give you the warnings, but you got to get up and do stuff. Buy the book, hand the book around, get it, just help get us on #1 on New York Times bestsellers list. Because you know what? I've had 4 New York Times bestsellers. I have never been interviewed by a large-scale media organization other than MSNBC. Interesting. This book will get the attention where they will have to explain, Malcolm, why do you think 30% of this country is ready to kill 60, 65, 70%? And I'll say, don't listen to me, listen to them. It's their words. They want to do it.
Okay, well, thank you. You are brilliant. You're courageous. You're Nance Stradamus. I hope that we can, take all of this advice and do something with it. Fernand, you're there, right? Your image is frozen, but you're here, right?
I'm still here. I can see you and hear you.
Any last words? Anything you want to add, Fernand?
Buy Malcolm's book, and after you're done buying it, share it with someone else and do what Malcolm says. Vote en masse to defend the American democracy, and make sure if you see or hear this type of activity, report it and then peacefully protest it, because the last thing they want is attention. And of course, thank you to you, Christina, and to Mitchell Kaplan of Books and Books for always providing this forum. Hopefully we'll be able to do it in November for the Miami Book Fair again.
Thank you both so much. I want to leave everyone. Thank you for joining us. I want to leave everyone with something, if you can hear it.
The best form of protest there is, right? I'm a dance party.
Okay. Anyway, good night, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. Never lose hope and fight. Fight. Okay. Bye, everyone. Bye.